Welcome to today's event. We're going to go ahead and get this show on the road. Welcome to our South Central Telehealth Resource Center Telehealth Roundup, which is a webinar series we created about a year ago at the onset of the pandemic to try to bring relevant topics to the forefront regarding telehealth and virtual healthcare. Today, we will be discussing virtual play therapy with our special guest, Dr. Susan Elswick. We will introduce her in just a moment. I'd like to talk a little bit about the SCTRC and what we do. My name is Joe Schaffner. I will be your moderator for today. I am the Assistant Director of Outreach for the South Central Telehealth Resource Center, and we are located within the Institute for Digital Health and Innovation at the University of Arkansas for Medical Sciences in Little Rock, Arkansas. We represent 3 states, Arkansas, Tennessee, and Mississippi. You can see in red in the map there, and you can see the other regions with their respective colors as well. So if you're tuning in today outside of our region, feel free to reach out and we'll connect you to your TRC, or we'll be glad to help you in any way we possibly can. I want to also point out that there are 2 national telehealth resource centers. If you look at the lower left-hand corner of your screen, the Center for Connected Health Policy and the Telehealth Technology Assessment Center. I will be posting those links in the chat box, as well as some other resources. Dr. Elswick did send some material to 4 registrants, and I emailed those out last night. So if you registered today and have not received that material, feel free to email me and I can shoot those over to you real quick. And I'll put my email up in the chat box as well. So what do TRCs do? What do telehealth resource centers do? Well, we are a federally funded program dedicated to assist any and all who are interested in telehealth in helping their program, their clinic, their practice, whatever it is, help them be successful. We help with policy guidance. We help with technology. We help with all sorts of things. So if you have a telehealth pickle, feel free to reach out and we'll do our best to address those needs, or at least point you in the direction that we think might be best to go. I want to encourage everyone to visit our website. And again, I'll put this link up in the chat box, but we have several resources there. We have this webinar today is being recorded. It will eventually be on this website. We also have our previous telehealth roundups on there, as well as modules. We have a page dedicated to COVID-19 resources. So I want to encourage everyone to check that out. Here is our generic info. Let me get that in the chat box real quick so we can get this started. All right, there we go. That's all so if you need the materials Dr. Elswick sent out, feel free to email me and I'll shoot those to you real quick. And with that being said, I would like to introduce today's special guest, Dr. Susan Elswick, who is an associate professor at the University of Memphis in the School of Social Work. She is the School of Social Work Certificate Coordinator at the university. Dr. Elswick has over 16 years of clinical mental health experience that includes community mental health, case management, residential programming, school-based programming, integrated behavioral health, infant mental health, and home-based services. She is a licensed clinical social worker in Tennessee, Arkansas, and Mississippi, which fits our region perfectly. She is also a registered play therapist and supervisor. One of her areas of research focuses on the use of informatics and technology in the field of social work. Dr. Elswick serves as the co-chair for the Council on Social Work Education Annual Program Review Technology Track and focuses on harnessing technology for social good and behavioral health practice. And she is a current faculty affiliate on the campus at the University of Memphis with the Institute for Intelligent Systems. She is a co-PI on the University of Memphis's $2.58 million National Science Foundation funded project, which will lay the foundation for a future learner data institute at the university. Most recently, she was awarded funding from the Urban Child Institute to develop the School of Mental Health access to resources through Telehealth Research Training and Treatment Center. She is also owner of a tech startup, Engage Data Systems, LLC. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Susan Elswick.
Hello, everybody. everybody. It's so good to have you here. Thank you for joining. I'm very excited about being able to share this content and information with you today. So I myself am still a direct practitioner. I still provide direct service delivery to children and families in Tennessee and Mississippi and Arkansas. And so I firsthand, not only from being a professor at the university and learning to adapt education in that virtual platform, have also, with the rest of you, had to learn how to adapt clinically to a virtual platform. Luckily, over the last few years, my private practice had actually been using telehealth services for about 6 years. So the transition during COVID wasn't as intense for our program as it was for many of the therapists across the nation. So it really did kind of thrust us into this requirement of learning very quickly, how do we use technology and practice in an efficient and an effective way. Especially when we talk about different types of practice like play therapy, where it is usually very child-centered. Some of what we have to do in a virtual platform may shift slightly in order to serve those children and families through that virtual platform. So what we're going to learn today, we're going to learn about troubleshooting some common barriers to virtual programming. We'll also talk about how you may be able to set up your own virtual playroom. I'm going to give you some links and resources that will actually help to step you through that so that you can create your own virtual backgrounds, you can create your own virtual playrooms, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. We'll also think about ways in which to engage children in virtual therapy, not just in play-based, but in virtual therapy altogether. Also, how do we encourage parents to participate? And I'll definitely be sharing some stories with you about my experiences in telehealth programming. So when we start talking about setting up telehealth for our practices, some people may just really be wondering, what does telehealth really look like? I haven't really jumped straight into it. I've been doing phone therapy, or I've been trying to figure out how to see clients still face-to-face. But really all teletherapy is providing direct service delivery through the use of some technology platform, whether that be an iPhone. A lot of the adolescents in the region that I serve, they don't have laptops. They don't necessarily have iPads, but they do have access to cell phones. And so that can be a great way to connect with adolescents. A lot of my younger kiddos still will use their family's technology in order to access service delivery. The only thing is you have to make sure that you have a webcam, you have a microphone and a speaker, and that the client also has access to that within their home environment. We're going to talk a little bit more about the importance of privacy in doing teletherapy in the home environment with young children. Families are part of that dynamic, but we do want to make sure we're creating safe spaces for our children so that we can do that really deep work that we need to in therapy. So when we think about telehealth, it really is to provide service delivery for individuals who may not be able to access services in another way. If we think about rural areas across each of our states, Tennessee, Arkansas, and Mississippi, there are very rural areas where there is very limited access to mental health clinicians in those regions. So telehealth is actually not a new practice and has actually been utilized for a long period of time within these rural areas that happen to have not enough clinicians. Oftentimes, these telehealth services were provided through medical hospitals in order to do some outreach and therapy in those areas. Oftentimes, telehealth historically was mostly used with adults and the elder population or the aging population, but we've also seen where over time, school-based mental health supports have even been provided by medical hospitals and community mental health centers through telehealth programming. So why would we want to do telehealth? One of the reasons I just mentioned was because to help assist with breaking down some of those barriers to intervention. It helps to decrease stigma. It decreases the need for us to transport a client to and from service delivery. Sometimes it's a faster and easier way to access mental health services. So there's a lot of reasons why telehealth actually can benefit our clients. But when we think about statistically, when we think about children in the United States and the level of mental health need that we see, these are just some statistics on general diagnoses of ADHD, behavior problems that kind of exist both in the community, home environment, and across school settings, anxiety and depression. And when we take into account COVID, these numbers are on the rise. Okay, so there's a lot of need for providing supportive services to children and families, but some of them may not be able to access it. One, because of COVID currently, but also it may just be because they don't have access in their current region to those services. Here in Tennessee, where we are in Memphis, all of our schools are still 100% virtual. They're looking to shift back into that face-to-face programming, but a large majority of our school districts here in the region have been doing telehealth in order to continue that social emotional learning and support of their children during this time. We also know that there's a high need when we look at the medical health needs and the mental health needs of children across the nation. There's a high need, and there also is a very high need for us to provide those services in a safe environment. So if we look at these on the statistics, a lot of children that have depression will receive services for those needs because that's something that people catch very quickly and identify, and they know the significance of it. So they try to seek services out for those children. Anxiety, it's about 59.3% of those children actually receive some level of service. And then when we think about behavior disorders, only about 53.5% of those children that need services actually get it. And that's just talking about K through 12 age group. When we think about young children, birth to 3, that infant mental health piece, and even children ages 1 to 6, they're kind of in that toddler and preschool age group. We know there are significant needs for those individuals, and they very rarely get access to service delivery when that's necessary prior to kindergarten. So we really want to try to utilize telehealth to address these needs in the community and ensure that we're supporting families. It's a growing trend. Many of us are more comfortable with it now because we've had to be. It improves access to service delivery and removes those barriers. Now, if you haven't already started a telehealth program in your organization, some things to think about on your end is you definitely need to make sure you're using a HIPAA compliant system in order to serve your clients. So they don't necessarily have to purchase anything. They just have to have access to the technology, access to a computer or a phone that has a webcam and speakers and video capability. But on your end, you want to make sure you're using a system that is HIPAA compliant so we can ensure the safety and security for our clients. Many private programs use Zoom for Healthcare, which is a great platform, but any of the platforms that you see here, and there are many more, could definitely be utilized in your program. Now, here in the Memphis region, our community mental health center that's embedded in the school system uses Microsoft Teams. The only thing you need to make sure is that you have a business associate agreement with that organization saying that they have a HIPAA compliant server. So you want to make sure your BAA is on. So if you are already using Microsoft Teams and now you want to use the HIPAA compliant version of that, you would want to make sure you have a BAA in documentation so that you can prove that. Things that we serve clients, the different needs that could be addressed through telehealth. Personal life crisis like COVID, I've gotten a ton of referrals recently just because people are really struggling with trying to find some normalcy. Grief, another thing that is really prominent now. Anxiety, depression, behavioral challenges of the family environment of a child. One of the things that I would caution is if you are working with individuals that may have some level of psychosis, we really are very cautionary about trying to use telehealth platforms and practices for those individuals because it's not necessarily indicated as helpful. We really want those individuals to feel grounded and to feel as if they're part of reality. And sometimes this distance therapy can be problematic. So when you're serving clients, those are the kinds of things that you need to think about as you start working with them. We also want to make sure that our mental health clinicians are trained already in evidence-based best practice. They're already using things like TFCBT or play therapy, or they're trained in cognitive behavioral therapy practices or motivational interviewing. We're going to continue to use those evidence-based practices. The only change or alteration is the way in which we're providing that service. Also, we want to make sure we feel confident and comfortable with using technology. Oftentimes we hear students, like when we think about young children, they're very tech savvy. That they would be considered what we would call digital natives. They grew up in a technology-rich environment. This is very easy for them to adapt to. But those of us that are digital immigrants who may have some knowledge of technology, but we don't feel really fluent in utilizing technology, may have some struggle in transitioning to this telehealth model. And so just think about that. Are you struggling with a little bit of digital literacy, and that's what's preventing you from moving forward with using technology in practice? And there are ways around that. Seeking some consultation and support, as well as getting some additional training so that you do feel comfortable in that virtual environment. Now, when we think about play therapy specifically, one of the reasons why play therapy is such a powerful piece is we have the opportunity to actually play with the kids. And that is the way that children communicate with us, through play and through that interaction. That is a little bit more challenging in a virtual setting. So I want us to kind of think through, how might we set up a playroom for therapy in a virtual space? Now, the very first thing is, not everything has to be virtual, right? So I can actually pull out my play toys from my playroom. I can pull out my puppets. I can pull out my sand tray. I can pull out my miniatures. I can pull out my dollhouse. And as long as I am sharing the screen with the child so they can see what I am doing, then they have the ability to continue to play with me. They may have to direct me, right? Oh, I want you to put this figure here, or can you make the animal do this? But you can still have good play experience, even though it's not actually virtual where you're playing a digital game. And we'll talk more about digital play therapy in a minute. You can also engage the child for them to go and grab some toys from their playroom or from their room. So one of the things that I always start off with in every session is, I will take my camera or my technology that I'm using, and I will actually walk around my playroom. Okay. And I'm walking around the playroom and I'm showing the playroom to the children that I'm working with. And I might just ask them, is there anything in here that you would be interested in playing with? Now, many of my clients have already experienced my playroom. They have already been in my playroom and have had opportunity to play with those toys. And some of them have very significant toys that they enjoy playing with in every session. But I still give them a virtual tour of my playroom. And then I use the same prompt. This is the playroom. Anything in here you can play with, and I'm here with you and you are safe. I'm going to use the same verbal prompts that I would in a direct play therapy session face to face with a client. I also encourage my kids to take me on a tour. Let me tour their room. Let me tour the toys that they may have access to or not have access to. I am lucky enough that I'm able to work with my caregivers in advance, right? So if I know I'm working with a kiddo that's working through a specific issue, maybe it's trauma related, and I know maybe this child was in an acute traumatic experience. They were in a really bad car wreck. I may ask that caregiver before the next session, I really want to be able to work with Johnny next week. And we're really going to be kind of talking a little bit more about the incident with the car. Do you have access to toy cars in your home? And if so, could you make sure that those are available in our next session? I'm also very lucky that I've got a lot of grant opportunities, so I can actually purchase play kits, developmentally appropriate play kits, as needed, and mail those into the home environment. So if I know that this family may not have access to a lot of toys, that could be something that I could build into my budget in order to support them so that we can do that play work. I use my sand tray very often in play therapy virtually, share my sand tray, share the miniatures. I may pull out certain miniatures I know that are pretty powerful for this child. And then I just might say, show me your world in the sand tray. And they may have to direct me to put the miniatures in, but we're still collaborating, and it's still child-centered, it's still child-led. I do a lot of creative arts, expressive arts programming, drawing, where we can share screen and the child can draw on the whiteboard while I'm watching. Also, I even paint and draw with my kids where they can see me standing up and painting, and I can see them because they're sharing that screen with me. So there's lots of ways that you can use what you already have and what you're already doing in play-based practice in a virtual setting without having to do too much adaptation. But if you are really interested in this whole concept of setting up a virtual playroom, and you will have access to this PowerPoint and these links, these are wonderful tutorials that will take you through step by step. How do I create a virtual playroom where I can share the screen with my child that I'm working with? And on my bookshelves, on this virtual screen, there are bookshelves with specific items on it. And every item that I click takes me to a specific activity. So for example, if I set up my bookshelf and it's got a teddy bear on it, and it might have a stack of Uno cards, and I can shift this up every week if I want to. So I have the teddy bear on there, and the kid might go, I want to play with the teddy bear. So I click the teddy bear, and then the teddy bear takes me to a virtual game where they get to dress the teddy bear or they get to play with the teddy bear. If I click the Uno cards, it directly takes me to, it's a hyperlink that directly takes me to an online version of Uno where we can actually play the game together. So there is a way to set up a virtual playroom where it is interactive and the child does have choice, and it does take you to interactive links where the child and you can actually play or engage together. So these two tutorials will tell you step by step how to create that virtual playroom in order to utilize it in practice. Also, I don't know if any of you that may be play therapists, there is a really awesome app that's currently available on iPhone. It's called the Virtual Sand Tray app. And so I love Sand Tray and I use it quite often in play-based practice. But if you really want the kid to be able to tangibly change the dynamic of the sand tray, or to add their own miniatures, or to really work on their own story in the sand tray, virtual sand tray may be the way to go. There are some wonderful trainings that are happening right now about how you can use virtual sand tray once you purchase it on your iPhone in practice. It is portable, it is interactive. It gives me the ability to share my screen with the child, but they can also have remote access, which means if I say to the kiddo, would you like to build a sand tray? And they say yes, I give them remote access and I can see what they're building on the sand tray, but the child's in control of it. They're picking their own miniatures and they're placing them in certain areas and they're changing the color of the actual sand tray. So it is very accessible. Again, it's no cost to the client. There is a fee for you if you decide to download that virtual app onto your iPhone. And there are a lot of play packs you can buy. So there may be a play pack for OT play. There may be a play pack for EMDR. And so there are ways to incorporate other aspects of therapy into that sand tray work. I will say that I think the virtual sand tray download, if you do the very generic one, I think it's like $169 for the clinician, and then the client gets free remote access. And then every pack that you add to it has an additional cost. But I encourage you to, this YouTube video will take you to a display where you can see virtual sand tray being utilized with a client. And you can determine if you feel like that might be something you would use enough in practice. Now, digital play therapy is slightly different than what we just described, and it really is the use of video games, internet, and digital technologies in the therapeutic environment with the kid. And it's utilized for skill development, to help the client with orienting and getting more insight as you're moving through that therapeutic process. And then it also can be used for psychoeducation purposes. So a couple of examples. Actually, I love Minecraft, and I use Minecraft pretty frequently in my therapeutic practice, not only with individual clients, but in group sessions. So one of the things you can do, and if you decide to use Minecraft in your play-based interventions, you do want to make sure that you get your own separate server that is secure. That means you host a separate server and you would only invite which clients you want to be in that server at a specific time to have access to it. The reason you want to make sure you do that is you don't want just anybody being able to pop into your therapy session when you're in Minecraft and take over that specific session. So you would definitely want to have your own server, and that's the way we host our own server. I have one for individual clients, and then I have one that I use for groups. I use Minecraft for social skills development as well as for problem solving. It's been very effective for working with children that are high functioning autism on the spectrum, and in social skill development. Because what we found in practice is the kids would come into group therapy and they would interact with each other in the group, but then they would leave that group session and they might not have much engagement with peers outside of that group. So we wanted to continue what we were seeing that was working so well for them in the face-to-face group. We wanted to continue that between sessions. And so we developed this separate server for Minecraft where the children actually have to go in. They go in at a specific time and a therapist is in the world with them. And as they're developing or working through specific activities that the therapist has developed, like maybe they have to build a house or they have to get all of the horses that are in the area and pin them in and feed them and take care of them. So there is some type of prompt that is given by the therapist in that session. And these children have to work together in a virtual platform and utilize those skills that they've learned in face-to-face setting to build something together and to work together. And then the therapist is there to reinforce, to answer questions, and really just to kind of guide the intervention. So we've seen great progress in using Minecraft in practice. One of the wonderful things is Minecraft has an educational section where there are some free downloadable packs that are already developed. There is one already developed for mindfulness and social skills. So you can go to the Minecraft for Education website, and if you type in, or if you go to the link that I provided that says Mindful Night, it has a curriculum that's already pre-developed that talks about what does the leader or the therapist or the teacher need to give as instructions. What is the activity you're trying to get them to accomplish? And then the world is already preloaded for you. So all they have to do is jump into this world that you've downloaded on your separate server, and they can go in and work on self-regulation skills with each other or social skills or problem solving. And so these are already pre-developed, very easy to adapt, and kids really love using digital play in practice. Okay. Also, when we think about how do we help a client who might need some insight, some of it can be done through very simple technologies. Maybe I'm working with a child who is really struggling with identifying who they are or feeling connected to the community, or maybe they're struggling with peer relationships. As I'm exploring that with them in therapeutic practice, one of the things we can do is just use Google Earth. So I get online and I'm looking up this child's specific address because we were in an individual session together and that's confidential. And I'm hovering over it, looking at that Google Earth picture. And then I might ask some prompting questions. Look, there's your house. Tell me more about your neighborhood. Tell me more about your neighbors. Tell me more about the school and where it is in proximity to your house. So that in itself is the use of digital play therapy by using a Google Earth map, which is easily accessible to anybody who has access to a computer and internet. So sometimes I think we overthink how play therapy can utilize virtual and digital pieces. That is just a really simple example of how to use digital play therapy in practice. As I mentioned before, it can also be used for what we consider psychoeducation or to communicate something to the child about a strategy we want them to use or about a diagnosis. And so we might use electronic links or information or downloadable charts that the child can then use to track their own behavior if they're interested in, am I improving? So even the use of digital play therapy in using technologies that assist the child with tracking their own progress is also an example of how you can use technology in practice. We also want to think about how we might be able to, I had a clinician that I work with that said, I thought about this the other day. I really want to do expressive arts with kids, but in this virtual platform. She's like, I found an app. And the app looks like a keyboard and it's a piano keyboard. She's like, do you think that would work? And I'm like, absolutely. Like totally open the app up and ask the kids to make a song. Let them have an opportunity to play some music. So you can even incorporate things like expressive arts or music-based interventions into our telehealth work. One of the reasons I do love telehealth practice in this day and age is we had to become creative. We had to think outside of the box. And it really has opened up a channel for me to be very creative in my interventions and to think of things that I would have never thought about 3 years ago while I'm working with kids in this kind of a platform. Now, when we think about the use of video games, I already mentioned Minecraft. I use it very frequently. We also at Engage Data Systems have also developed a series of virtual escape rooms, again, for problem solving. So if any of you have ever gone to a live escape room where you're given little tips or techniques on how to get to the next level so that you can get the key and get out, we have developed virtual escape rooms for that very purpose, to enhance social skills, to enhance problem solving. It could be done individually in an individual session, or it can also be, it works so great in a group format. Now, we have developed both Minecraft downloads. So if you have a separate server, but you don't have time to develop your own Minecraft world, you can definitely download the Minecraft worlds that we have developed, as well as the virtual escape rooms. There is also a wonderful play therapist that, since the beginning of the pandemic, has been offering free trainings on how to utilize things like Roblox or Fortnite and Minecraft and Lego work online, Animal Crossing. And all of those trainings are completely free. And she actually walks you through what it looks like to play that in practice, and also assists you with setting up those specific types of games in your therapeutic work. And that link at the bottom, Let's Play Therapy, that is the organization that hosts those free trainings. Now, you don't get APT credit for those. It's just knowledge building, skill building for yourself. But they're really great, and I just love that she's offered them to the community for free. Now, so that's a little bit about some of the things that you can do that can be fun in play-based interventions. But what we often get concerned about is, how do I keep the kid engaged? Like, kids in virtual play is hard. I can't tell you how many times I've been on a call with a kiddo and I've been dropped on the floor 17 times and we're spinning around the room. And I just go with it, right? So if the kid's doing a lot of movement and they're moving around a lot, then I just make that part of the play, right? It looks like you really want to move. Let's put the phone down and let's get the wiggles out, right? So you might embed some of those movement activities into what you're doing. So we're going to talk a little bit more about how do we engage kids in that play-based intervention online. First of all, everybody is exhausted. Zoom exhaustion is real. This whole concept of not being face to face, for it not being really tangible, it takes a toll on us. And so we really need to make sure that we're not only taking care of ourselves, but we're also assisting the client with ensuring that they're going to be successful. When we talk about Zoom exhaustion, what you might see from clients, which we are definitely seeing in educational systems where they're 100% virtual still, kids are easily distracted. They're looking off camera because something passed by, or somebody's got music playing in the background, or my brother's watching TV and I can't stay focused. Also, extreme fatigue. Some kids are just falling asleep in class. They can't stay awake. Kids will also say that they're experiencing really dry eyes, or they might be itching a lot, or their vision is kind of blurred. They also have decreased interaction. When you start to see that interaction level start to decrease, then we know we need to do something to get them re-engaged. Also, a lot of children are expressing difficulty sleeping at night. And then we are seeing this impact of class participation, where they're just not participating like they would if they were in a live session. So some of the things that we need to do in order to combat that, in order to ensure that the therapy process is effective, is we're going to definitely need to assist kids with using mindfulness techniques, as well as grounding them before we start our work. And then we also just want to make sure that we're taking into consideration that they are exhausted. They're doing some kids are on Zoom 8 hours a day with their education program. And so I don't want my virtual therapy to be an additional exhaustion to them. So we'll talk about some things that can break it up and make it better. We definitely want to try to embed some kinesthetic and movement activities. As I mentioned, if I'm working with a kiddo and they're already moving, I'm going with that, right? I'm just going to let them get those wiggles out. Let's use some movement activities. We can make that therapeutic. In itself, it's therapeutic. But, I might even say, I want you to think about a time when you were super excited about something, and show me what that looks like. What would it look like if you were super excited? And then they have the ability to kind of jump around and show me. But you can also take it down a notch because maybe we're doing a lot of movement activities and now the kid's so hyped up, like they can't concentrate or focus. So then I need to bring the activity level back down. So maybe I'll do some grounding techniques, or, let's do a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. What are 5 things you can see, 4 things you can hear? I might even ask them, look around your room. Please identify 3 red things that you see. So again, I'm just helping them to regulate their nervous system and to ground them. So then I can start some more therapeutic work if I need to. Yoga, stretching, any of those kinds of activities will assist with bringing that activity level down. So depending on my client, if I have a really hyper client who really needs to get the wiggles out, we'll start there, but I'm going to have to assist them with regulating so that we can move forward. But I'm going to have some clients that start off real low level. They're just exhausted and tired. And how can I build that momentum and get them more energized through movement activities? So there are a ton of activities that you can do. I give a link here that had some really, really, really cute ideas that other therapists are already using in practice. But when I work with little bitties, when I'm working with young children, I might even say, let's get ready spaghetti. And they're like, what is that? And I'm like, everybody stand up. So we stand up and they've got their camera set up and I'm set up so they can see me. I said, stand real still and tight, like you're a dry noodle. Okay. And then when I say ready spaghetti, you're going to act like a piece of boiled spaghetti. And what would that look like? And so then they fall to the floor, right? And then you just keep doing that until they can get engaged. That helps with listening skills. It helps them re-regulate. It also keeps them focused. So there's all kinds of cutesy, like movement activities you can do to engage children in therapy. Now, I embed these throughout my session, right? So as I see the kid maybe kind of disconnecting, I want to try a movement activity and bring them back in. Also, we need to be understanding that our session links probably will look different, okay? I work with kiddos, infancy all the way through adulthood. It is really hard to keep a 2-year-old on a therapy session, right? And it's not developmentally appropriate for me to expect them to sit there for 45 minutes. So I'm going to have to adapt my session length. Now, one of the things I can do in that situation with a young child is I engage the caregiver, right? I'm not the only playmate they can have. I could definitely utilize caregivers in play, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. But I also have to understand that 20 minutes is pretty much the tap out point for a lot of kids in telehealth. So what can I do to extend that time if I need to, right? If I need to add some movement activities or calming or grounding activities, those can be helpful. But I will also get the kids up and move around. I might tell them we're going to do a scavenger hunt today. So what I want you to do is grab your phone and I want you to go around your house and I want you to find one thing that represents happiness for you in your home. So they run and grab it and then they have an opportunity to talk about it. So I'm embedding kind of that feeling, social emotional learning in addition to movement and in the technology world. Remember, you're always going to fall back on your evidence-based skills. Play therapy is an evidence-based practice, and we're going to trust that, right? It might feel different to us because it's not what we're typically trained in, but it can work beautifully in a virtual platform. I'm going to practice mindfulness. I'm going to assist the child with practicing mindfulness just as a grounding and regulation tool. We also need to stay in contact with parents and teachers because they need some of this information as well in order to ensure that the child is successful beyond my therapy session. Now, in play therapy, we do set limits, we do set rules. That's just a general type of social work play therapy practices that limit setting is part of it. We do want the child to have some open choice, but there may be times that you need to set some rules and expectations. Actually setting consistency within your session, like I'm going to always meet you on Tuesday at 3:00 and it's going to be through telehealth. And one of the things I need you to do is that in order for me to see you really, really well, I need you to put your laptop or your phone on the desk so I can see you. So those are just some of the rules we're talking about, just to make sure that therapy can be really successful. When we create predictability, when the kid knows, oh, Tuesday at 3 is my session, and this is how I log onto my computer, and this is the kind of thing that we're going to do, and I have to also keep my that predictability assists children with regulating. Okay, so it's a regulating support for their ability to calm down and to focus and to attend to what's going on. We cannot expect them to stay on for a full hour or 45 minutes. So we have to kind of adapt that. Role play works beautifully in Zoom or telehealth platforms. If you're doing a group, I love to do breakout sessions where I might give them a scenario and then I ask them to play it out. Why don't you create some kind of a script that would show me how would you work through this issue or this problem if you were in school and it happened. So using role play activities in that virtual space, especially in group-based settings, works beautifully. We talked about using games in that kind of interactive way. Also, I do check-ins. As soon as I get the kid on the virtual call, the first thing I do is a check-in. We might do a scan from my head to my toes. How am I feeling today? Do you feel anywhere in your body where you're holding any energy or anxiety or stress? So I start off with a check-in and I end my session with a checkout. And that could be as simple as saying, here's a feelings thermometer. And I post the feelings thermometer on my screen share. And I ask the kiddo on a scale of 0 to 10 right now, 0 being you have no stress at all, 10 being you're very stressed. Where are you? So that check-in also offers a great opportunity for us to kind of get a gauge on how's this day been for this kid? How are they feeling right now? And also the check out lets us know, have I grounded you enough before I'm going to release you into the world? Have I grounded you enough in this setting that you're ready to transition to that next activity? Whiteboard activities, as I mentioned, sharing your screen, giving the kid something visually to look at, whether that's using your whiteboard or letting the child use the whiteboard, or you're sharing a worksheet, or you're sharing an example of an art piece that you're doing. Really using that visual piece is so super important in this kind of technology-based practice. Also, I use a lot of active student responding. So at the very bottom of the screen, you might have a hand clap or a thumbs up or a smiley face. So if I'm doing a group activity, I might ask the kiddos, use your chat box, use your active student responding. How many of you have had a really good day today? Thumbs up, right? So that's a visual thing for me to be able to see. Out of the 6 kids I'm working with, 3 had a pretty good day. The other 3 didn't respond. So I need to kind of check in with them and see how it's going. You can use breakout sessions. I will often do this in therapy where I have kids that are somewhat resistant to therapy. I'll let them know you can ask for a break. Like if this gets to be too much, you can ask for a break. And I'll give you a minute or so, and I'll create a separate breakout room, and I can create some calming music in that breakout room where I actually put the child for a minute or so they can regulate. If they want to do that on their own, we can do that together if we need to. So that can be done in individual sessions. Breakout sessions are great for groups. Maybe we're talking about a specific topic and I need them to get together and talk about it. Then I can, they can get together and problem solve. This could be an icebreaker activity so they could learn who each person is. I can also give different activities for them to do. Like you guys come up with your own movement activity. And when we come back together as a group, show it to us and we'll practice it together. So using your breakout sessions, especially in group therapy, will be so beneficial because it'll break up that monotony of just sitting there and staring at each other and their screens for, 25 to 30 minutes. Activities to engage in virtual space. These are just some examples. You're going to get access to all these links, but you can share your screen. We talked about the whiteboard. I've had clinicians that let children draw on the whiteboard, or maybe we're talking about a specific topic and they might say, what are some ideas? Jot down some of your ideas and we can talk about it. Online games that are already developed, literally you just have to click the link and share your screen, and then the child can play with you. So, and you can upload your own Jeopardy system because there are some PowerPoint versions. So say, for example, today I wanted to talk about friendships, making friends. I can create an entire Jeopardy board that is about friendship, how to make friends, or tips and techniques on friendship development. And so every time we ask a question on the Jeopardy board, it's related to making friends. and related to the topic that we're talking about. So there are ways for you to adapt it very specifically to your specific topic that you're working on in session. Then there are just some fun games like Uno and chess and checkers that are already virtual, and it gives you the opportunity to interactively play with the child. I also use in the virtual space coloring books where we can work together on coloring in a coloring book, a virtual coloring book. I can just give the child access to be able to fill in that virtual coloring book while I'm talking to them as a way for them to kind of, continue to interact while we're speaking about really hard topics. The spinning wheel is great. So it's just a feelings, it's like a social emotional learning technique, and it's a feelings wheel. And I might just give the kids each an opportunity to take a spin. Whatever it lands on, it landed on sad. What was one sad thing that happened to you today? And so it's using that tool, that virtual tool, to continue to do the work that we're already doing. So these are just great. Jenga was pretty fun. I just found that one not too long ago, and you can actually play the Jenga game. There is a way to color code it. So maybe I want to do emotional literacy Jenga, and I want to tell the kiddo every time you pull a red, let's talk about an experience in your life where maybe you felt kind of angry. And so there are ways to kind of adapt it to be more socially, emotionally appropriate for your work in that virtual space. Now, we really want to make sure that we're staying attuned to our clients, that we're attuned to what their needs are, that we're really present in the moment, and that we're able to kind of address the needs that might be coming up. Some people struggle with understanding that attunement can totally happen in this virtual space. We as clinicians may have to work a little harder in order to be attuned because there's lots of things that distract us too. Okay, so taking away those distractions, making sure you have an opportunity to really focus on this kiddo will be important in that virtual space. We also already kind of talked about how to create a safe space when we think about virtual programming, sharing my room where I take a tour of my play therapy room so the kid can see it. They give me a tour of their space. That can actually assist them when getting prepared for doing telehealth. We talked about the check-in and check-out, where I check in and check out with a kid every session just to see how they're doing and where they are. I also, from the very beginning, we talked about our literacy skills when we talk about digital literacy. We also need to think about the parents' digital literacy skills. So one of the pieces of my intake that I added since COVID is an assessment that we give parents, and if the child's old enough, an assessment we give the child that just kind of assesses what level of digital literacy do they have. Will telehealth even work for this family? Are there ways that we can coach them through it and teach them a new skill? So I have embedded those kinds of assessments in my intake packets now, just so that it's part of our practice moving forward. So I never have a question as to whether or not a parent can actually complete telehealth successfully with their child. Helping the child be in the here and now, like those grounding techniques are really helpful. One example is ask them, can they actually locate the floor? If they're sitting in a chair, do you feel the floor under your feet? Right? Or maybe you want to sit on the floor. Go ahead, take a seat on the floor. What does it feel like to sit on the floor? So just really using that opportunity to really create some grounding. It's also totally fine to tell the kiddos, when you're in my office, you have access to all these like tangible items, stress balls, and all these things that you can use in practice. We can set up your own sensory box. So when you're starting to feel overwhelmed at home, and I notice it because I might notice, like I can tell you're getting a little nervous talking about that topic, right? You want to get your box out. And in that sensory box, there would be calming techniques that you've already identified with the child that they can use and pull out as needed. And then, of course, when we think about sensory movement activities, that again will help to create safety in the space. And I will tell you, I have a lot of adolescents that do not like seeing themselves in the camera. Okay, so we'll talk about that. I get it. I hear you. Like being in the camera's a little bit overwhelming. What can we do that would make that feel less intense? And some kids are like, well, can I like angle my camera where you can only see part of my face? I'm fine with starting out like that, right? And so how do we help them to feel more comfortable in the moment? And then eventually what you see is Now I'm not so nervous about it. Now this feels like a safe space. I don't feel uncomfortable sharing my picture with you. You can also teach them how to turn off their own camera where I can still see them, but they can't see themselves, which also assists in decreasing some of that anxiety some children feel about seeing themselves online. Now, this is a huge problem in public education. And I've worked with a lot of teachers to help them understand it's not they're being non-compliant. It's not that they don't want to comply with your regulation of being full screen. It's causing too much anxiety at this moment. And can we adapt it slightly until they feel more comfortable? So that's again another reason why it's so important to encourage participation of parents and teachers as much as possible. Now, there might be times where you're worried. What if this kid dissociates when I'm working with them? Because if we're working in trauma work, that can happen. We want to make sure we're assessing that on the front end, right? How much is this child potentially likely to dissociate in that virtual environment? But I also can monitor their cues, right? Their physical cues, their behavioral cues that would let me know they're getting disengaged. Maybe their activity started really high, now they're kind of dwindling, or it started really low and now they're getting really. I'm going to monitor those things and I'm going to use my skills to engage them in movement as needed or grounding techniques to get them back to the here and now. So grounding techniques are great if I ever see that a child might start to kind of pull away from that therapy process. Now, creatively including caregivers, I will tell you a little bit of my experience in working with families online. When you don't set clear expectations, you have certain things that happen. So early on in my virtual play and virtual therapy programming, I was working with a young lady who was always very consistent in therapy, actually really liked therapy, was very engaged. She was always usually in the same room that I could recognize, and she always had headphones on. So she had some predictability about her too. There was one day that she gets on. She's not in her normal space. She doesn't have her headphones on, and she's acting really disconnected. And so it took me a minute. And I kind of asked her, I was like, kiddo, are you okay today? Is something going on? And then she kind of looked off to the side of her screen and then she looked back to me. And so I stopped and I said, oh, mom, are you in the room with us today? And then mom sticks her head in. She goes, oh, hi, Dr. Ellswick. Yeah, I just thought I would sit in today and I wanted to kind of know what you guys are working on. So that's my fault, right? Because I didn't set clear expectations and boundaries for that caregiver. So we want to discuss those expectations really early on in the process so we don't have those kinds of hiccups. I'm totally fine with the caregiver being part of the programming, but this child wasn't expecting it, and it totally changed the dynamic of the therapy session. We also want to help the caregivers to realize the child needs a confidential space. They need a place where they can feel comfortable and they can talk about things that are bothering them freely. And so sometimes I have to work with the caregiver. Let's talk about the spaces that are available in your house. You know, where would be a good space where she could kind of close the door and he could kind of be alone. And if we needed you, we could come get you. And so it really is helping the caregivers think through those pieces. I also will often engage the caregiver either at the beginning of the session or at the end of the session, because a lot of times they want to know, what are you working on? Now, this is less likely to happen in my face-to-face clinic. Parents drop them off, they pick them up. Sometimes I have that caregivers like, what did y'all do today? What did you talk about? And I'm able to kind of give them some tips. You know, here's some things, you know, that went really well today, and you should try and practice them at home. And the kiddo's already going to talk to you about it. But in that virtual space, it's slightly different. So I will typically ask the caregiver, how much input do you like? Because we need to go ahead and get that squared away at the beginning. If you like a weekly check-in, the first 5 minutes of the session are your opportunity as the caregiver without the child around to give me updates, ask me questions. Sometimes parents want to tell me what they'd love for me to work on, which is, you know, not really how we do play therapy. But for whatever reason, it assists the caregiver with regulating around what we're doing in practice. And then sometimes I'll end the session where I pull the caregiver in and I'm like, oh, things went really well. And, you know, she's doing such a great job. And she wants to share a few things with you today that she learned. And so then I'm kind of engaging that caregiver in that therapeutic process. We can also engage the parents in family playtime. The parent and the child could participate in the scavenger hunt. You know, one example would be, okay, mom and kiddo, both of you go in separate rooms and find something that makes you feel safe and bring it back, and we'll talk about it. So not only are they engaging in that play-based activity, but they're going to get to hear in each other's experiences and reasons for why they picked a specific item. So you can always incorporate families into that therapeutic practice, and actually can be very helpful. It's really interesting to see how parents engage with their child. A lot of our parents struggle with play. And so even thinking about how can we give that parent some play skills so that they can do these things on their own between sessions. So this is an example. The link that I give you in the previous slide will take you to this example scavenger hunt bingo for families that you could post in your virtual platform. And then you can use the X marks the spot to see who ends up getting the bingo. Is it mom and kiddo, or is it dad and the other kid? So you can just set it up to be more interactive and playful while engaging the caregiver. I also am a huge proponent of special playtime. So that child-parent relational therapy piece where we, assist the caregiver with understanding the importance of play. And that could be a homework assignment that parents are using outside of the session. I'm basically just teaching the parent or the caregiver how to play and how to be present with their child in that play. We teach them skills on not asking questions, not giving commands, letting the child lead the play, giving them labeled praises, giving them supportive feedback, imitating their play, giving back some reflections. So we basically are training that caregiver to be the play therapist in the home environment. And when we think about that, engaging the caregiver that way really enhances therapy, because then it's not just happening in my session, and those skills the child is learning will start to generalize into the home environment. Many of you may be familiar with familial play therapy techniques. Those are beautifully done in a virtual platform. And then we do a form of this called prescriptive parent play. Remember, I told you that I have a budget that I can actually send developmentally appropriate toys to a home, and it might come with a prompt card. Here's some building blocks. Why don't you try this with your child? And then, next special play time, why don't you build a house together? So, the prompt cards help caregivers that really struggle with play with their child feel more confident because they have a step-by-step guide in how to play with that specific toy. You can even do, this is a really great example of another family-based intervention, build a dollhouse. So these would be the materials. All they need is a large shoebox, and they need, go get some magazines and some tape and some paper. And then you would just ask them to work together in the session to create a dollhouse that represents their family. So these are just really cute activities that can be done easily and adapted into that virtual play space. Some of the references that I mentioned, these are a lot more resources that you can click the links and it'll take you to some of the things that we've talked about. Some of the things that we've already discussed, you can actually just immediately download and use in your own virtual space. Some of these might take a little more time because you're developing them based on the guidance of the YouTube video. But there's lots of opportunities, and I'm just really glad we were able to kind of talk and share this. And I want to take a second to take some questions, because there might have been some questions about some of the things we talked about. And I just want to give a little space for that.
Wow, thank you so much. I feel like we could continue talking about this subject for hours on end. It's such a fascinating world. And thank you so much for giving us a glimpse into this world. We do have a request for your comments here from Elaine. She says, with the increase in virtual learning, trying to create a balance with family, life, teachers who are virtual classes, children in therapy, equity in technology. What are your comments on how to address all that going on?
So I work pretty close. A lot of in my private practice, a lot of the work we do is actually collaborating with schools. So I've done a lot of training with teachers, just helping them to understand how this Zoom exhaustion is really real. Also working with parents, because sometimes parents will get overwhelmed. Well, she won't sit down and be in your session with you. And mom, it's okay, right? We're doing the best we can. You're doing the best you can. So it's being present in the moment and understanding that it's not gonna play out the way we hope it will in our minds, and it's being flexible and it's being understand. I'll have some parents that'll call me 10 minutes before a session and they'll go, you know what, I just don't think we can today. thank you for telling me. I completely get it and understand that. What can I do to make things better for you? Right. So it's having some grace for yourself. It's having some grace for the kids that we're serving and the parents that we're serving and the teachers that are doing this really hard work this year. But I think it's monitoring all of that and identifying what in this moment will be best for this family. If it's canceling the session, okay, then we can do that and we can check back in next week. So I really just kind of let my families guide me in what they need and what's going on for them.
Yeah, it sounds like there's a lot to shooting from the hip and kind of feeling each situation is different. I'm curious, I have 3 children myself, and Minecraft is such a wonderful game. The music, I mean, it's just all therapeutic, even when you're not using it for therapy. I was interested to see Roblox and Fortnite on there. I'm
Mhm.
curious, have you had any complaints from any parents about those games?
It's a great question. So you definitely have to take guidance from your families, right? I have some families that are like, we don't do shooter kind of games, which Fortnite's not exactly like, but it does include some interaction like that. And so you definitely want to take guidance from your caregivers as to what they feel like, what rules have they set into place, how, and really and truly, when you think about Fortnite, I'm kind of thinking like late middle school kind of getting up there, right? So that we developmentally appropriately using those games and addressing those needs. I have some parents that are like, no games at all. They're gamed out. They game all day long, on the weekends. And sometimes it's also helping the caregivers to understand that actually game-based play can be very helpful, especially when we talk about children like on the autism spectrum. They really struggle with that interaction, but they can get online and play a game and have a conversation with a kid just like a typical child would in a face-to-face setting. So there is value in the use of those games in programming, but you do need to take guidance from what is it that your caregivers want? What is it that they're okay with or not okay with? And then the links that I gave to those videos, those therapists that are using those Roblox and Fortnite in practice give a great overview of how that could be adapted and utilized for therapeutic purposes.
That's great. Well, Dr. Ellswick, I'm not seeing any more questions. Thank you so much for your time today. Thank you so much for what you do for the children that you serve. And thank you, attendees, for joining us. We'll put out some more information about next month's webinar, so stay tuned. Everybody stay safe out there and have a good day.